Five of the Best is an opinion-based series on films which I have seen released during the chosen year. This is to celebrate previous years in film, not to cause any offence. All opinions are my own.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Five of the Best, a series in which we celebrate movies year by year. At the end of the year we talk about the movies that I've enjoyed the most and that we've talked about on the channels, on the various channels. And I suppose that's a good place to start with. Over this last while and over this last few months, and certainly since the last Five of the Best video, there have been a few changes on the channel. And one of the most positive probably changes of Five of the Best is that there is now a short version of this video that appears in both YouTube Shorts and TikTok that's already live ahead of this video. So if you want a shorter version and not want to listen to me talking for a long time about all these movies in depth, you just want to hear the short version of my favourite films of the year, there is that now. But if you're here for the long haul, and I appreciate you so much for doing that, let's get started with the Honourable Mentions for 2025. So to get started with the Honourable Mentions, we'll do the format as we started last year, which will be 7.5s, then 8, then 8.5, and then, if we have that many, 9s out of 10 ahead of the top 5. So to start with the 7.5, let's start with The Monkey. A movie that I would probably class as my favourite Final Destination film, which we did actually have a good Final Destination film that came out in 2025. But for me, The Monkey was probably the most fun exploration of that, of course based on the Stephen King short story. Had quite a good cast, and overall was one of the more exciting and more fun horror comedies of the whole year, and certainly of one of the past few years. A movie that didn't take itself too seriously. Another movie, and the next on the list, is The Accountant 2. And talking about movies that don't take themselves too seriously, I found The Accountant 2 to be actually a bit more fun than the first one was. The first one, of course, starring Ben Affleck, and the first one did have Anna Kendrick. But in the second one, we had a lot more of an addition of John Bernthal's character, and this kind of almost buddy cop, even though they're not policemen. there was that kind of chemistry and dynamic between the two, made this genuinely one of the more fun and enjoyable films that, again, didn't take itself too seriously, and a film that you would think would. It played more into the fun aspects, and that was where it was really effective for me. And then after that, for the first half of the year, this was one of the biggest releases we had, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. The potential final film in this franchise, this long-standing franchise that had went for 20 or so years, maybe even 30 years. And was it a worthy send-off? It certainly was. It certainly had the amazing action set pieces. It had a pretty good story. I don't think it was just as effective as the previous one, but I do think as a finale to this long-standing franchise, this great and kind of staple of modern action on big screen, I think Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning was a worthy finale. And then after that, we had a movie that's really surprised me. F1. Brad Pitt as this kind of retired, past his prime F1 driver against Idris's up-and-coming star in the sport, of a sport that I had no interest in going into this, and still don't really. I'm not an F1 fan, but I'm a fan of the F1 movie. And I think that when you think about a movie that you aren't the target audience, but it still works, I think that's a really glowing indictment of that film, and certainly did what it should have done. And it was exciting. The action set pieces were great. The kind of in-car shots were really effective, and being directed, of course, by Joseph Kosinski, who did Top Gun Maverick, F1 was a lot of fun, a lot more fun than I thought it would be. And going from a movie that was a lot of fun to going to probably the saddest movie of 2025, and certainly the most heartbreaking movie, Bring Her Back. The Philippo brothers have found their niche. Talk to Me was really good as a horror film, but I think Bring Her Back is even better. I think they are continuing to make a stamp on this current genre of horror that we are all. I mean, horror is on such a high, and it's such a theme of 2025. Bring Her Back as a new directing partnership, those two brothers. I can't wait to see what they do next. Bring Her Back is really effective. Sally Hawkins in it, one of the most underrated performances from any actress of 2025. Bring Her Back was really, really good, but a hard-hitting watch as well. And while we're on the topic of horror, let's talk about someone who's synonymous with horror, who didn't make a horror movie this year. Mike Flanagan made Life of Chuck, and a movie that I genuinely thought did a lot of things right. I think Tom Hiddleston in the main role is a really fun and exciting exploration of the kind of reaffirming side of life I thought Mark Hamill was really good in here. I thought Chiwetel Ejiofor and Karen Gillan. I thought a lot of the performances were really good in here, and I thought the story was an interesting one in regards to time and time spent together and age. I do think that the best is yet to come when Mike Flanagan really ventures out from the horror genre, but I think this is a really good first step for him into what comes next that he isn't just bound by horror, even though he's a master at it. And going from someone whose name is synonymous with horror to almost the name synonymous with horror, Stephen King. Another Stephen King adaptation, The Long Walk. A movie that really explored kind of the desperate times and certainly a lot more relevant today than it should have been when it was written all those years ago. A great dual performance here by Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson. Of course, you also got Mark Hamill in here giving a good turn as well. I thought The Long Walk was a really effective one on something that was a really simple premise, but was explored to almost its fullest. Really, really effective. And going from one movie with two good lead performances to another in Nuremberg. Russell Crowe as Goering is one of the most interesting, but one of his best performances in a long time, coupled with Rami Malek in one of his better performances of this year and certainly of the past few years as the doctor interviewing him, and more about their conversations in the cells rather than the Nuremberg trials they're based on, and of course do take place around that time. Nuremberg was really one that went under the radar, a bit like Lee did last year with Kate Winslet, and for me, Nuremberg was one of the more effective war and war surrounding films of 2025. And to our final 7.5, and the last dual lead performance that was, it's the dual lead performances of the year from two wonderful actresses. Wicked for Good, starring Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Again, I talked about it last year for the first Wicked. I enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed the second part too. I thought it was a really worthy follow-up, and I thought the way it integrated the Wizard of Oz was effective. I thought the story was told, I thought the songs were good, and I thought overall it was a satisfying conclusion to this stage play adaptation. I thought Wicked for Good was one of the more fun and enjoyable and also emotional movie of the year. I thought Wicked for Good did a lot of things right and was a worthy follow-up to what had started the year before. And now into the 8 out of 10s. The first one at the very start of the year, We Live in Time. Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield in a non-linear but really, really effective rom-com that also carried a lot of emotional weight that really translated well to me as an audience member watching this. I thought this was one of their better performances for both of these actors that I'm such a big fan of. I think Florence Pugh is going from strength to strength, and I think for Andrew Garfield, he's also one of the more underappreciated actors working today. So a movie like this, while it maybe wouldn't be as effective for everybody, I thought it worked really well. The non-linear aspect, as I say, was really effective, and I think, having these two in any movie adds a lot of weight to it, and I think having these two in the kind of co-leads worked really well. And while we're on the topic of Florence Pugh, let's talk about a bit of a resurgence that the Marvel Cinematic Universe had this year. Yes, Captain America Brave New World didn't really hit the mark, but Thunderbolts certainly did. Thunderbolts was one of the more effective and delved into a lot deeper topics than I thought a Marvel movie would have, frankly, the balls to nowadays. I thought it was really good, led of course by Florence Pugh, but certainly that surrounding cast, so the comedy moments, the emotional moments, and also what it sets up to come next in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I thought Thunderbolts ticked a lot of boxes, and when it's first announced, it was probably the one that you would almost have banked on that really wouldn't have been effective, but it really, really was. Thunderbolts was great. And after that, Lilo and Stitch, the live-action adaptation, was basically my favourite family film of 2025. It was really effective. The original animated version still holds a place in my heart, and I still prefer the original. But I thought, as far as these adaptations go, and I think when you go into these with such low expectations because of what has come before, I thought Lilo and Stitch did a lot of things right, particularly the casting of young Lilo. I thought the surrounding cast worked really well. I thought the CGI Stitch worked into the story and wasn't in a silly way. I thought Lilo and Stitch was so much better than I had hoped it would be. And I think maybe I'm in the minority for that, but Lilo and Stitch for me was just probably the most warm film, and like it felt like a nice warm hug. And back to talking about the MCU, it had 2 out of 3 real hits this year. Fantastic Four: First Steps. a great new Fantastic Four, the best Fantastic Four we've had on big screen so far, and if nothing else, and this was something I talked about in my initial thoughts for the movie, it's a great entry point for anyone who wants to start watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe that doesn't want to watch 437 movies to get caught up and do a million parts of homework to try and get caught up with the story. You could watch Fantastic Four and then probably watch Doomsday, and that's a great thing. There's a great entry point here for fans. And I thought, not only just that, it was also a brilliant story about family dynamics, about the pressures of parenthood. I thought Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby in particular were really, really strong, but as was Joseph Quinn, as was Ebon Moss-Bachrach. A really good performance here from everyone involved. And after that, we had my favourite comedy of 2025, The Naked Gun. This one seemed to get pandered by critics a lot. I had such a blast with this. I thought the slapstick humour that you just never thought movies like this would get made again. You know, the original Leslie Nielsen ones of course, The Naked Gun, but Airplane, those type of movies with one-liners and quips and, you know, silly sight gags. It's as clever as it is silly, this movie. But it works so well. Liam Neeson in a comedy role after being in so many serious roles over his career is an absolute masterstroke. Pamela Anderson, this is probably one of my favourite performances by her, and certainly in a comedic role. The two of them work brilliantly. The Naked Gun is so silly, but you'd be hard-pressed not to have a good time with this. And then after that, we had Begonia. My favourite Jesse Plemons performance to date. Another great Emma Stone performance in a Yorgos Lanthimos film. And for Yorgos Lanthimos, it was probably the closest he's been to reaching that heights of Poor Things again. Begonia was equally parts wonderful, equally parts relevant to today's culture and today's world we live in. Begonia was really, really good, and when it comes to Yorgos Lanthimos films, I'm always excited for what he does, and this was just another rewarding Yorgos Lanthimos film. And for the last 8 out of 10, Black Phone 2. I really, really enjoyed the first Black Phone. The kind of set in the one scenario, the kind of basement dynamic with Mason Thames and of course Ethan Hawke. I thought Black Phone 2 elevated it a lot more. I thought the Super 8 footage that these directors do so well, harkening back to something like Sinister and of course in the first film, were probably the most effective here in the second one rather than the first. I thought Mason Thames was also better in this, but the real star here was Madeline McGraw. She was fantastic in this, and I think there's a real strong career ahead of her. I thought she was the best part of the Black Phone. I thought the emotional moments hit a lot more in the second film. I thought Ethan Hawke as the grabber has now made this into a top 5 of modern horror character that's been introduced. I thought the Black Phone 2 was such a lot of fun. I thought it was emotional. I thought the horror moments and scares really worked and were really effective. The Black Phone 2 was a real improvement on the first, and I really enjoyed the first. And now into the 8.5s. At the very start of the year, a complete unknown. Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. Timothée Chalamet continues to stamp his authority on this so many genres, from Dune to Wonka. He has such range. But I do think when it comes to music biopics, A Complete Unknown has automatically cemented itself as one of the more interesting, effective, emotional, best storytelling, and best incorporation of the music in it. I thought it was instantly one of the best biopics I've seen in recent years. I thought him as the performance was brilliant, and it did what any good biopic does. It made Bob Dylan, it made me go home and listen on Spotify to Bob Dylan. And I think that's what, at the end of the day, any of these, if they're really effective, should do. But it had some brilliant performances in here too. After that, I'm a real sucker for anything John Wick. Every John Wick film I've either really enjoyed or absolutely loved. So when it came to Ballerina, you add Ana de Armas, who had such a great turn in No Time to Die as an exciting Bond girl. I thought that would be great to see her get her own movie from that. Scratch that, she gets to be the lead in a John Wick spin-off and a similar kind of John Wick-esque character. And then, of course, including the man himself in this and set where it was in the timeline. Ballerina was such a lot of fun. If you love John Wick, this was just more of the same in a real good way. I think it probably sits about halfway up the road in regards to where it sits on the best films of the bunch. It's probably about middle of the road, because I would say it's better than the first two, but it's not as good as the third and fourth. But it's damn good. Ana de Armas in the role suits this. I mean, she's great in action roles and has been before, but I think this is one of her best. And then going from a high action-filled movie to one of the calmest movies you'll ever see, Train Dreams, starring Joel Edgerton in his best role I've ever seen him in. A movie so calm and so almost uneventful about the normal life, and normal life set, over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago, and the kind of change of the tide in regards to technology and building and everything and transport, and to just be a man who cuts down trees in a world of that, but to be this effective, this emotional, this hard-hitting, but more than anything, one of the most reaffirming films about life and the goodness of life. Train Dreams, I feel like, went so much under the radar, and it really shouldn't have. It's one of the best films of 2025. And for the final 8.5, Avatar: Fire and Ash. The first Avatar I quite liked for what it was. The second Avatar, Way of Water, I thought was a real improvement on the first, and a lot more interesting. And then Fire and Ash came along and kind of did more of the same that the second one did, but it was really damn good, and certainly upped the scale in regards to the epic battles, certainly the visuals, some of the storytelling, certainly the villain arc worked the best here, with the kind of dual villains of Varang and the General, and the way that worked, it worked. It really did, and of course the box office shows, as it always does with these Avatar films. Avatar: Fire and Ash, if you're looking for a visual cinematic experience, look no further than this. And now into the nines, and the two that were the absolute closest to breaking into this top 5. The first of which, 28 years later. My favourite of the franchise so far, one of the best zombie movies I've seen in a long, long time, certainly on the big screen. I thought some really brilliant performances in here, particularly from young Alfie Williams, the Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Jodie Comer is fantastic in here, Ray Fiennes is always brilliant. The story was definitely the most interesting of a zombie film that I've seen in a long, long time, and certainly this dynamic of not when the infection broke out, but where it was a long time down the line, and where the world stands now after this long period of time. I thought 28 years later was just the best of the franchise so far, and I really enjoyed the first one too, but I just thought this was a step up again. And for our final honourable mention, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Oscar Isaac is one of my favourite actors working today. If I see him attached to the project, I'm automatically interested. Jacob Elordi as the creature was an absolute masterstroke of casting. You've got Nia Goth in here, you've got Christoph Waltz, you've got a real stacked cast, David Bradley, a really, really stacked cast here. But after watching the original, or one of the originals, I know it's a long, long standing, I watched the 1931 one not too long ago, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. But I do think when it comes to modern adaptations of these long, long franchises that have had, or well, not franchises, but movies and media that has had, or IPs that have had so many adaptations over this last 100 or so years, I think Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein might just be the best of the bunch when it comes to anything Frankenstein. I thought it was really damn effective. I thought the kind of creator and creature dynamic between Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi was absolutely brilliant. I thought the performances in here were really, really strong. I thought the story, I thought the visuals and the cinematography in here are unbelievable, as is always the case with Guillermo del Toro. But overall, Frankenstein was just one of my favourite films of the year, and it was so, so close. And to be truthful, 28 years later was also close. But I thought for a long time Frankenstein was going to be in this top 5, and it's just been flipped to that 5th spot. So with all that being said, let's get into the top 5.
Now, let's get on to the list and start with number 5.
Weapons. It's directed by Zach Cregger and stars Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, and Amy Madigan. So before I start talking about Weapons, I should probably talk about 2025's year as a whole in regard to horror movies. And I mentioned a few there in the Honourable Mentions and how many that really were effective this year. And 2025 was a real year for horror. But something that Weapons does, and actually a movie higher up the list does as well, which I'm sure you could probably guess what it is. What they do so well is they don't just capture that horror audience, if you like, because something that Weapons did really well was it captured almost the summer, the whole summer period, and that kind of, it was kind of middle of the year, kind of July, August this was released, I believe, and for that, I mean, this was the movie everyone was talking about, not just horror fans. And I thought that was something that Weapons did so well in capturing. This was like almost the thriller of the year, as well as being a horror movie. And something that Weapons does so well, because I'm going to wax lyrical about this movie, as you can imagine. And I talked a lot about it when I first put my reaction up after I'd just seen the film. And my thoughts haven't really changed too much, and they've actually just really been amplified in regards to how much I enjoyed it. And the more I think about it, the more I really enjoy this movie. But something that Weapons does, especially on a first watch, and I can't think of many films, if any, in 2025 that on a first watch are as effective. On a second watch, knowing where this story will lead, it may not be just quite as effective, but that first run through, that first time of never being ahead of this story, and this also works for the next entry too, in a different way. But what Weapons does so effectively, and this works so well in Zach Cregger's previous work in Barbarian, and a movie that you were never ahead of, and a movie that really has one of the greatest flip on its head scripts that you think a movie is one thing and it really is something very different. Weapons doesn't have as much of a flip on that, but what it has narrative twists that are consistent and consistently effective. And the way this works throughout Weapons is it's the kind of non-linear storytelling, and when that's done really well, it culminates in a movie like Weapons. But to have that as a horror movie, and going back to that point about horror being such a big topic and such a brilliant point of 2025, and probably the highest, when you think of a subgenre that got the most love this year and had the most quality and most consistency of quality, 2025 was amazing for horrors. But actually for Weapons, in a weird way, it's the thriller and it's the narrative and it's the never be ahead of the story was what I loved more than the actual scares and the horror here. But that's not to say that Weapons horror isn't effective, because absolutely it is. It's effective in a very different way. Yes, there's a few jump scares that are effective and they're not cheap, but a lot of the scares are a lot more subtle in Weapons, and I think that was something that really, it tapped into that kind of thriller narrative and kind of riding the line between a real devout thriller movie and almost like an investigative mystery movie, and then you flip to the real horror side. And the way it kind of ride the line of both those two genres and combine them really effectively, it's one of the best horror thrillers, I think, of the decade. It's really, really effective in that way. And a lot of that's down to the performances here, particularly Julia Garner. Julia Garner had a really good 2025. She started pretty bad. She started being in Wolfman, one of my worst films of the year, so I didn't have too much hope for her. But then she did this, she did Fantastic Four: First Steps, and, she cemented herself as one of the newer rising stars in Hollywood. But her in Weapons is really effective, and I think, when it comes to something that works really well about this, in a movie like this that is almost fantastical in a lot of elements and kind of over the top, it does still keep that authenticity factor. It keeps that realness, and it keeps the, it doesn't ever go outside of the realm, especially for that first half and when you're first getting introduced to the characters and the different dynamics and the different, perspectives that we see. You don't ever feel, okay, well, this is getting a bit silly or this is a bit over the top. It's always that intrigue. And then when you get into that final act and that, or kind of in the middle of the movie, and when we find out where we really stand with all this and where it gets to that culmination in that final act, Weapons really is a rewarding watch too, but with the tension and the almost like, I hate using that term, but that edge of your seat sense of all these characters feel very real. There isn't a hero and villain dynamic here. Yes, there's a very clear enemy by the end of the film, but when it comes to the actual characters and the people of the town, it feels very authentic in that way, in regards to it being different perspectives. If this actually happened, the parents of the children, the school teachers, the principal, the people in the town just naturally, the police officers, all these different perspectives are, you don't ever go, well, that character's a bit much, or that wouldn't really be a normal reaction to this. Even at its craziest moments in that final act, it does somewhat keep that level-headedness. And I think that's something to be said for something that, on the outset, if you looked at this script and seen where that final act takes us, you really wouldn't. You would go, it shouldn't be. It's going to end up quite silly then. But no, it doesn't. It doesn't. Weapons keeps itself grounded in a lot of ways, And the way it does that is really effective, and down to the performances. Another performance I want to mention here is Amy Madigan as Aunt Gladys in, a top 5 memorable performance of 2025, maybe even higher than that. Really, really astounding work there. Josh Brolin also as well. Josh Brolin has a great year, and I'll be talking about him again on this list. But I thought the cast, Alden Ehrenreich as well, I thought the cast here worked really well. Even Benedict Wong was really good in this as well. I thought Weapons was a lot more of what I wanted than Barbarian was. Barbarian was a surprise, but it wasn't like my movie of the year when that came out. But I was excited to see what Zach Cregger did next. But when you've seen Weapons, and I remember talking about this when I was doing my initial thoughts on the video, or on the movie, which was, Jordan Peele was desperate to get this and didn't get it, and like sacked his people or whatever it was. You could see why. But to have someone like Zach Cregger really making his mark on horror nowadays, and his mark on, and he has after this, certainly from Barbarian, but it's kind of that thing when once they've hit the mark twice, or certainly when they've improved on the second go round with, as a new director, I'm locked in. Anything Zach Cregger does, I'm invested. And then I read he's doing a Resident Evil movie in 2026/2027. I'm very much on board. Zach Cregger is a great director. It's a great cast. Weapons is it's certainly one of the more popular movies of 2025, and it earns that. It's a very worthy watch, and especially on the big screen, and being in that kind of cinema audience and everybody along for the ride with this movie. Weapons it's worth all the acclaim it got over the year, and I've watched it maybe twice since then. I actually think after this video I might go and watch it again, because Weapons is so damn good. Number 4. Wake Up Dead Man, A Knives Out Story. It's directed by Rian Johnson and of course stars Daniel Craig alongside Josh O'Connor and a hell of a lot of other people. So when it comes to the start of the year, and you look at your anticipated movies of that year, and for the anticipated movies in my 10 most anticipated movies of 2025, Wake Up Dead Man and Knives Out Mystery was on there. Knew nothing about it other than it was Rian Johnson again, and it was Daniel Craig. But when you have that thing, and I talked a little bit about it there when I talked to a director, that it becomes almost a surefire thing that you're interested in what they do next. But not only that, when you've got Rian Johnson, who of course had his critics of the Star Wars stuff, we know that, and it's not even worth getting into. But I don't think even the most avid hater of Rian Johnson could deny the quality. If you watched all 3 of these Knives Out films, this, Glass Onion, and then of course the original Knives Out, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that didn't enjoy at least one of them. For me, they tick so many boxes for me. And it did get to that point where if the third one was almost as good or around the same realm as the first 2, it's going to be on my top 5 of the year, because I absolutely loved Glass Onion. I said at the time, after watching Glass Onion, I didn't know if I preferred it or the first one. I've watched them both again since making that video, 2 or 3 years ago, and I still am not too sure, because I think they all have different elements that work so well, and some has higher highs and some has lower lows. But even at the lowest points of these movies, they're all really effective, especially for the first 2. So going into Wake Up Dead Man, it was like, please just give me more of the same. I don't often say that, but when it comes to this, please give me more of the same, more of what I've loved in the previous 2. And then you look at this cast, and it's an absolutely stacked cast, mixed with legendary actors and actresses. Glenn Close is in here, but also Kaylee Spiney. You've got, Glenn Close is one of those legendary actresses that has been around for so long, but is still giving great performances when she's in good films like this. And Kaylee Spiney is almost like, one of the brighter rising stars. So the Knives Out films have it has a good blend, and the first film obviously did that really well. You had people like Jamie Lee Curtis, and you had Toni Collette, but then you also had Ana de Armas, and it was that kind of not a passing of the torch, because it's not to say that their careers are done by any stretch of the imagination, and certainly not since then. But they're almost like a combination of great old actors, or certainly of an older generation, maybe the 80s, the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. And then you've got maybe actors that are kind of in the middle of their prime, you know, like a Daniel Craig, like even in here we've got a Jeremy Renner, for example, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but I do like him in roles, and I thought he was good here. And then you get, you know, this kind of new crop that are introduced in these. You know, in Glass Onion you had Janelle Monáe, in the first film you had Ana de Armas, and in here you have the wonderful Josh O'Connor, who has really been going from strength to strength, and he is someone that, when you actually look at someone who is a guaranteed star, even before Wake Up Dead Man, I think this almost cemented it for a lot of people, because not everybody's seen Challengers, not everybody watched The Crown when he was in that, not everybody's seen, you know, he's been in a few different roles. He was in the movie with Paul Mescal not that long ago. You know, he's been in quite a lot of kind of on the periphery of really breaking into the mainstream Hollywood. But then you get Wake Up Dead Man, and of course he's going to be in the next Steven Spielberg movie. So by the time that is released, Josh O'Connor becomes a household name, if he's not already. But he is the real star of the show, because I'll wax lyrical here about Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc. I said it in the previous 2 times I was talking about Knives Out. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is one of the more memorable characters of this last 5 to 10 years. One of the more iconic characters. And when it comes to, you know, because this is like our version of a modern Hercule Poirot. And of course we have the Kenneth Branagh versions with, you know, Haunting in Venice and Death on the Nile, and what was the other? Oh, the original, or the remake of Murder in the Orient Express. And they're okay, and of course Hercule Poirot is the, like, what people think of as like the movie detective. But when you think nowadays, I mean, Benoit Blanc is a real, of course the voice is, you know, that foghorn leghorn, as Chris Evans said in the first one. It is that kind of over the top, but it works so well, and it brings that kind of light-hearted charm and comedy and charisma to a movie, and of course a subject matter that is quite serious in this. And the way that works, and something that Rian Johnson has really been able to capture in all 3 of these movies, is having so many characters, but them all feeling very relevant to the story. Even the ones that don't have lots and lots of screen time. Nobody feels too shortchanged in any of these 3 movies. And you'll notice there that I'm kind of just talking about all 3 of these movies as a whole, rather than Wake Up Dead Man individually. And of course it depends on what your preference is in regards to a setting for a murder mystery. Because Glass Onion, of course, on a rich man's island, Knives Out, a rich person's mansion. Here it's more of a community about, you know, it's kind of surrounding the church, small village. It's a very different dynamic. But that kind of through line, that kind of consistency of quality that the previous 2 movies had, Wake Up Dead Man has in abundance. And if you said to me, which of the 3 Knives Out movies are your favourite, it really is a hard task, because I think they're all, as I said when I compared Glass Onion to Knives Out originally, and now I do the same with this, all of them have different highs. You know, in here particularly, Wake Up Dead Man, I think maybe the biggest strength of this is not only the comedy side of things, and you know, it becomes the personal preference from all 3 movies, but when I think about what works really well in here, and this does work in the previous 2, particularly with, you know, Ana de Armas and Daniel Craig in the first film, and Janelle Monáe works really well in the second too, but I actually think when it comes to like a relationship between our main character that isn't Benoit Blanc and the detective himself, I do think Daniel Craig and Josh O'Connor have the most effective moments in the 3rd film rather than the previous 2. And I think that kind of carries this to being honestly one of the most enjoyable, well, I mean, it's in my top 5 for a reason. It's one of my most enjoyable movies of the year. And I think that kind of murder mystery element that you're never ahead, and a little bit what I talked about in Mentions there previously, you know, it is that kind of thing where you're never ahead of the story. And on a first watch, the Knives Out films work so damn well. And I said at the time, and I say it again, Rian Johnson, make another 10 of these. If we had one of these every 2 years with a great ensemble cast that you're kind of blending, and as I said there earlier, you blend the generations, you know, the new and rising stars with the ones in their prime, and then the ones that are, you know, almost in the kind of twilight of their career. I think the way that works so well, and continues to work so well in these, it's 3 out of 3. So, Rian Johnson, keep making these, please. Sign a 10-year. If it has to be done with Netflix, so be it. Make that deal, and I hope they keep getting limited, because I got to see this in the cinema, of course. That was a, I got to see that about, the way it had that limited run. It was only in the cinema for about 2 weeks, and I just about got seeing it before it was released on Netflix. Watching this on the big screen was a really rewarding time too. I just love this film. I love the Knives Out movies, and it always, I actually think when I went into Glass Onion more than I went into this one. When I went into Glass Onion, I had that thing about, it can't be as enjoyable as the first one. And then, by God, it was, in a very different way. And, it wasn't much of the same. It's much the same in regards to the quality, but it's not much the same in regards to the storytelling. And I think that's a real strong point of all three of these, because it's so easy to just be, oh, well, it's copy and paste, just with different people. It isn't. The story and the story beats are far stronger in different parts, and it always keeps you guessing. And it's a hard thing to do, especially in a series like this, that ultimately the premise is the same, but for the outcomes and for the story and the narrative twists and everything to be as effective as they are, it's no easy feat. So Wake Up Dead Man was great. I absolutely loved it. I love all the Knives Out films. It's already one of my favourite trilogies of this. Well, I mean, it started last decade, but over the last 10 to 15 years, it's certainly one of my favourite trilogies. Up there in my maybe top 5 favourite trilogies of this period of time. And I can't wait to see if they do another one, which I'm sure, they all do pretty well, so I think there's a good chance of that being the case. I hope and I pray that there's more Knives Out to come.
Number 3.
Nosferatu, a movie directed by Robert Eggers and stars Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult, and Bill Skarsgård. So the oldest film on this list, and a film that I seen on New Year's Day of 2025, and for most people, and certainly the States that got released a lot earlier than that, in 2024. Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' most recent film to date, and for me, Robert Eggers' best so far, and most effective in what he was going for. And I've been a big fan of Robert Eggers so far. Robert Eggers is a director that, like so many, and some of the ones I've mentioned already on this list, and even in the Honourable Mentions, when it comes to a director's name attached to a project, you go, okay, I'm very much invested. And for Robert Eggers, he has been a director that, for his work so far, particularly those main ones and the ones that we know him for, The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and now Nosferatu. And in those movies, and I hope I'm not forgetting any in that list there, but for those movies, there has been, for me, an increase in quality. And I know a lot of people seem to harken back to The Lighthouse as his maybe most poignant and most effective movie. For me, I like The Lighthouse a lot, but I didn't feel it hit as many marks for me as it did for a lot of people. But I'm happy to admit that it is a film that I do see the quality of, just maybe not to the extent that some people do. And The Witch, for me, it didn't really hit the mark anywhere near as much as it seemed to have for a lot of people. But for something like The Northman, which I felt it was quite a mixed response to, I really, really enjoyed, and I thought was really Robert Eggers coming into more of a mainstream director. And I suppose as a fan it becomes what you think of and what you want as a movie-going audience, and when it comes to accessibility as an audience for a movie. Because something like The Witch is a hard one to sell to any family member. It'd be a hard one to invite your mom or your gran to go and see a movie like The Witch on the big screen. It's almost quite a niche movie-going fan that would really, really appreciate that. But for something like Nosferatu, and even something like The Northman, The Lighthouse also falls in that category a little bit, that The Witch does. But as his movies have went, they've become a little bit more accessible to the wider going audience. And for me, I know this of course is personal preference, but for me, that's something that I really did enjoy. Because Nosferatu here, and obviously an adaptation of a movie and a franchise, and of course Nosferatu being that kind of Frankenstein, that Dracula knockoff of all those years ago. And I watched the original Nosferatu, the silent film from 1922, and it's an experience, let's say, going into seeing this, and I thought I would watch that just ahead of seeing this adaptation, 103 years later. And for that, I really, really got so much out of Nosferatu. And for me, on personal preference, for Robert Eggers films, Nosferatu is my favourite of his so far. And I say so far because he has been improving entry by entry for me. I like The Northman a lot more than a lot of people did. And for me, Nosferatu excelled on that even further. because Nosferatu had really good character work, really good storytelling and narrative work and kind of throughout it. Very good timepieces, very good setting of the scene in regards to kind of the tension, the eeriness, the atmosphere, and the kind of atmospheric, disturbing atmosphere kind of throughout this, especially that castle sequence. But something that Nosferatu does really, definitely better than its previous 3 entries, and of course it is more focused on that, of course, of where it comes from and where that original movie was and what it was to cinema back then and it is now, is the horror side. And I thought for me Nosferatu was in a really stacked year of horror that I'm calling 2025. I have to say Nosferatu was almost right up there with the shining lights of horror for 2025, for me, of course, being one that's seen in 2025. And I think for Nosferatu, what it does really, really effectively is it sets the scene, as I mentioned, in that kind of first into the second act of the film, and introduces the characters, and there's some really good performances in here. Nicholas Hoult is someone who I've mentioned when I talked about Nosferatu, who's kind of criminally underrated nowadays, and he's certainly getting his flowers in 2025 for Nosferatu, and also for his role as Lex Luthor in the latest and the new James Gunn Superman. And I think Nicholas Hoult has been someone in this last while, from many performances, he's really starting to stake his claim as one of the better working actors today, and I think he shines a lot here in Nosferatu as almost the man consumed by fear in this story. On the flip side, you've got other performances, someone like Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who admittedly has had some pretty stinky movies in this last little while, but for me, I thought he did a really good job in here as the kind of straight man of the story, the kind of what is actually going on here, like he almost acknowledging the craziness of this story that he's kind of wrapped up in. Emma Corrin, another shining and really exciting star that I see in lots of different projects now, and I think she's a great addition to anything she's been in. But someone I want to talk about kind of mainly here, as well as our villain and the main man himself, and we talk about that in a little second. But I want to talk about Lily Rose Depp. Lily Rose Depp was, I think, when it comes to actress performances of 2025/2024 for this movie, I thought Lily Rose Depp in here is absolutely breathtaking. I thought this was a star-making performance for her, and I hadn't really seen her in too many, if any, films before this. So for me, this was an introduction to her. I thought she was astounding in this role, and I thought she really, really encaptured that kind of... She's the heart of this film, but also she's kind of every bit of narrative and every bit of story kind of runs alongside or runs with her. Every action she makes and every part of the story is about her, and I think that is a quite a daunting role to take on for someone who hasn't really shone in certainly on a big stage like this. I thought Lily Rose Depp was absolutely wonderful here in Nosferatu. But lastly, let's talk about the performance that's the obvious one, Nosferatu himself, Count Orlok, Mr. Bill Skarsgård. Bill Skarsgård has really stamped his name as maybe the horror character actor of this generation, but of many generations for that matter. So to have been Pennywise, to have been Nosferatu, I mean, that is something astounding, to have even one iconic role in horror. But I do think Bill Skarsgård is really stamping his name, because we've also seen him in other performances where he isn't in, lots of makeup, really dressed up and being one of these really iconic villains. He was the villain in John Wick Chapter 4 and was really brilliant in that. He's been in a few other roles, something like Barbarian, for example. Bill Skarsgård has a lot more depth than I think he gets credit for, and I think he just kind of gets typecast, or not typecast because that sounds kind of in a negative way, but he is kind of billed as this really brilliant character actor with all the makeup and the face paint and everything. But other than that, he's not a lot else. He really is. But as a role like this, because you think of like the narrative of course It and the Pennywise and all the dynamic with that, and I think in both It and It Chapter 2, and I know It Chapter 2 has received half as well, but I do think that something that's kind of consistent throughout those whole films is the consistency of quality of the villain of Pennywise. And that's something that's really effective here by Bill Skarsgård again, as this another iconic and a character that has existed for over 100 years, and to be almost this generation's definitive version of that character, or certainly in the last maybe 50 to 100 years, he is the Court Orlok, he is the Nosferatu, and for that, I thought this was a masterstroke in casting. A masterstroke in casting actually all round for Nosferatu. But the last person I want to mention is the supporting actor. I mention him, it feels like I talk about him every 5 of the Best video now. He appears in some form or another. Willem Dafoe. When Willem Dafoe's character is introduced in the third act of Nosferatu, that's when it goes from being a really great film to an absolute borderline masterpiece of horror, of modern horror, of storytelling. Nosferatu is so damn good. And when I seen it on New Year's Day, I thought, it'll have to be a hell of a film to beat it. And there was only 2 in the whole of the year that exceeded the enjoyment I got out of Nosferatu. But for the movie itself, absolutely brilliant. And it cemented Robert Eggers as one of the best working directors today, and one of the more intriguing directors. When his name's attached to a project, you're excited. His next film, Werewolf, I can't wait to see what he does with that. Nosferatu is just amazing.
Number 2.
Sinners is directed by Ryan Coogler and stars Michael B. Jordan, Jack O'Connell, and Miles Caine. So if there was one movie you knew was going to appear here in some form or another, it's probably this, and also the next film too, the top 2 of the year. And for Sinners, it is a film that has got so much acclaim since it was released. Everybody's talked about it, and for most people you talk to, they'd probably say Sinners is at least in their top 5, or at the very most, top 10 movies of 2025. And why is that? Why is it so widely received? Why has so many people got so much out of Sinners? I think for me, the thing that works so well for Sinners is the absolute depth of quality, and almost how much layers of quality we have in here. Sinners is an absolutely brilliant movie, almost like a period piece about, a period piece in the sense of, when you talk about a time period that really is focused on, oppression and, the way that dynamic is handled and tackled in quite an effective way. Sinners also tells a story for the first half and the second half. It's a brilliant horror movie. Going back to that trend we've been talking about of how brilliant 2025 was as a horror year. And Sinners was the best horror movie, if you class it as that, for the year. Sinners is a music movie. A film that none better in 2025 and none better this decade have implemented music into its story as well as Sinners does. Some of the most beautiful set pieces in regards to music score, singing pieces, blues music. The way all of that is integrated into the story has been done better than most film. When I think about a film that integrates music for this generation, I can't think of too many more that come even close to Sinners. Sinners is absolutely amazing in that regard. And on top of all that, you've got a life-affirming story about brotherhood and family, and going back to that point about oppression and all the different levels of oppression. Sinners is such a layered film, and I think for that, and going back to that original point of why this connects with so many people, I think it's clear. Because I think anybody would watch this and get so much out of Sinners because of those different layers. And that's only a few things I've mentioned. There's so much more here. How it kind of transcends. Some of the scenes in here are absolutely astounding. You know the one I'm talking about. The I Lied to You scene is, the scene of the year, potentially. It's the scene of most years. It's absolutely amazing. The musical scenes, as I mentioned, are really brilliant. But something I think that Sinners almost gets a little bit lost with is its fantastic character work, and none better than what Michael B. Jordan does in a dual role. And for me, I liked Michael B. Jordan going into this. I liked the Creed movies. I enjoyed the Creed movies. I liked him in other roles. I thought he was really good as Killmonger. I thought he was the best part of Black Panther. Like a lot of people, I'm not the only person to have that opinion. But for me, when you come to a real star-making role, and a role that almost changes the opinion of the world on you as an actor or an actress, I thought Michael B. Jordan here in this dual role as Smoke and Stack was, I just add to the acclaim that everybody has talked about. He is absolutely wonderful here, and even though everybody going into this is so clear that we know this is just one person, after about 3 or 4 minutes of them being on scene together, or on screen together I should say, in a scene, you forget that they are. And I think that's another great layer of Sinners. The music here and some performances are absolutely amazing. You know, we of course have an amazing rendition of Rocky Road to Dublin, which was quite something. You know, and of course, kind of leading into that kind of Irish oppression and that kind of side, but of course it's mainly the folks of, you know, like black culture and how that has been affected and tackled and almost everything that comes with that from all those years ago. And how music was almost a saviour, but then was turned again. I think the depth of Sinners is really strong. And I think the more you look into Sinners, the more you delve deeper into what each part signifies, not just what it is on the outset, but what each part signifies on a deeper meaning and the legacy of a lot of these moments. It really is a poignant film in so many ways. But talking about music and talking about performances, I think it would be remiss for me not to talk about Miles Keaton, who, going into this, I had never seen before. Complete newcomer, he'd never been on my radar whatsoever. But him as Sammy Moore here, as Preacher Boy, this is right up there with the performances of the year. Especially on the musical side. His singing voice, his voice just in talking, is commanding. It is, for such a small and quite, you know, a younger actor, to have such a commanding presence on screen it really can't be or it really shouldn't be underestimated how powerful and how important Miles Keaton is for the success of what Sinners is. Yes, the brilliant supporting cast, you know, Haley Steinfeld gives a brilliant performance here as well, and a few of the other cast. Delroy Lindo, of course, is always wonderful, but this is one of his more fun and effective roles in this last while. Jack O'Connell as the villain, who's really came on leaps and bounds from back as Cook in Skins all those years ago to being so brilliant now on such a main stage. I think he is absolutely wonderful here as this kind of vampire villain, but again, not just a vampire. It's funny to be talking about two vampire stories back to back, but for both to be so beautifully effective and be so fantastically different from each other. Nosferatu and Sinners couldn't be further from each other, other than they both delve into that kind of vampire lore and what it explores with that in very different ways in different films. But for me, you know, when you talk about performances, I think everybody here is absolutely fantastic. The music is fantastic, the scene setting and the cinematography, some beautiful moments, some real powerful moments, some powerful visuals throughout this. But what Sinners will be probably remembered most for, I think, is how much emotionally resonant it is for basically anybody that's seen it, and for me, and particularly, and I mean, it's ballsy to have, you know, your real end of the story almost be in the post-credits scene. You know, there's an ending and then there's the kind of epilogue, if you like, of this, and that final scene is simply beautiful. After such a, you know, this movie doesn't pull any punches either. It has everything you'd want in a horror movie. It has everything you'd want in a thriller. It has everything you want in a movie that tackles subject matter that, you know, very important from a period of time of oppression. I think Sinners, as I've said a few times there, it's probably the most layered film of this year and probably the most layered film of most years. It tackles so many things in so many effective ways, and it honestly it has the, well, simply it has the balls to go places that, you know, a lot of films would play it quite safe. But everything that Sinners goes for here, it really hits the mark. And I think, you know, for most people, and certainly for me included, Sinners was a film, when you look back on 2025, Sinners is one that will instantly come to mind, and rightly so. It was special. And I should, just before I finish talking about this, I should mention, when it came to the end of 2024 and I seen the trailers for movies coming early in 2025, I seen the trailer for Sinners quite a few times. You know, going to the cinema quite often, you do get to see the trailers over and over again. The more times I seen the trailer for Sinners, the less I didn't really like the trailer from the first point. I thought, that's a bit silly, that's a bit naff. And it kind of got worse and worse and worse until the point I go, I just can't see that being good. I'll go and see it, but I just think it'll be a bit of a stinker. And honestly, when it comes to movies that, on an opinion of seeing a trailer or seeing kind of the early, you know, indicators of what it will be, I couldn't have been more wrong. It's probably the most wrong I've been about a film, and it's probably the most surprised I've been by a film's quality by the time those credits rolled. You know, well, the credits rolled, and then after the epilogue, and then the proper credits rolled. I just thought Sinners was an absolute masterpiece. I was so happy to be proven wrong, and it proved me wrong in nearly every single way. It was undoubtedly up there as a contender for movie of the year for me. And it, for quite a while, Sinners was sitting as my favourite movie of 2025 until it was usurped by our number one.
Number 1.
One Battle After Another. It's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Chase Infinity, Benicio del Toro, and Tiana Taylor. So you probably guessed this was on here in some capacity, because it's probably on every single person's that's seen this movie this year. It's probably on their top 10 at least. Or if you've just seen the short version of this video, you'll know this was my number 1. But let's talk about it a little more in depth. One Battle After Another. Now everybody has waxed lyrical about this since they've seen it. It's a very heavy hitter. It's going to be a real heavy hitter when it comes to the Academy Awards season. That's absolutely no doubt. And why is that? Why is it getting such wide acclaim? Why is Paul Thomas Anderson why has he done it again? Why has he, been able to recapture his best work? Simply put, One Battle After Another does basically everything right. And for me, it's personal preference on what really hits the mark. But I think, and going back to a little bit what I said there was Sinners 2, One Battle After Another was a film that, yes, I'd seen the trailers and I'd seen who was attached to it. We put Leonardo DiCaprio in any movie and instantly it becomes an attractive product. You've got Sean Penn, you've got Benicio del Toro, you've got Regina Hall. So it's a stacked cast, and of course you've got a director who has directed some of my favourite films of this past 20 or so years, particularly something like There Will Be Blood. And, he is an amazing director. It's no doubt about that for Paul Thomas Anderson. So there was that attraction to it. But to be honest, a little bit like Sinners 2, I watched the trailer for this and I said, okay, it seems pretty good. It's about rebellion. It's DiCaprio. I mean, this could be pretty good. But my God, One Battle After Another has so much depth in regards to, I think, what it does better than any other movie this year. I think it's the most relevant film of 2025, and certainly probably the most relevant film in regards to movies of this decade, and in regards to kind of and not to go into the political side of things too much, but when it comes to rebellion and things like that, I think it's a very much a poignant and a resonating aspect in movies nowadays, and there's not too many that frankly have the cojones to really take that on and tackle that. But I think the way this handles rebellion in all forms, not only rebellion on the wider scale, rebelling against the government, rebelling against whatever, but also rebellion in regards to a daughter and father dynamic. I think this movie is different layers of rebellion, and I think the way it does that and the way it handles that is so good. And to talk about some of the performances in here, I want to start not by talking about one of the big hitters, but someone who, again, and this has been a trend for these 5 films, someone who is a real introduction and someone who I can't wait to see does next is Chase Infinity. First of all, Chase Infinity is the single best name of any actor or actress working today. That is absolutely amazing. What a name, first of all. But second of all, Chase Infinity is someone, again, a bit like Miles Kate when I was talking about Sinners there. Chase Infinity was someone who has never been on my radar before. I'd never seen her work, was a complete unknown to me. So going in to One Battle After Another, and by the time, again, the movie ends, she cemented herself as a real bright star and exciting to see what comes next for her, because there will be some big projects at her door because of this, and rightly so. She plays not a damsel in distress, a lady who has to go through a lot of distress, let's be honest, but the way she handles that, she handles herself, and she's really damn tough. She is amazing in this role. And of course, her being the daughter of Tiana Taylor's character as kind of this leader of the rebellion, a real brilliant performance from her. She is, especially for that kind of first act of this movie, Tiana Taylor is the true standout star here. But when it comes to kind of consistency of quality throughout the whole film, Sean Penn is someone that I am not a massive fan of. I think he's pretty good in most things I've seen him in, but I would never go to a film going, oh well, Sean Penn's in that. Maybe that's on me. But when it came to One Battle After Another, and again by the time this movie is over, Sean Penn's role as this kind of general is the villain performance of the year. And that's a movie, and I've just talked about some films that have real fantastic villains, and truly iconic villains, Sean Penn's performance here is grotesque. He is hateable, and he truly is detestable throughout this movie. But what he does so well is he makes it a true villain. He makes an authentic villain, and I think that's what One Battle After Another does so well. I think when it comes to that authenticity factor, I think One Battle After Another, it feels very real. The conversations feel real. The kind of dialogue works really well, and that particularly shines with someone like Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio he's been the man for what? This is probably his 4th decade of being the man. He's brilliant in the 90s, brilliant in the 2000s, brilliant in the 2010s, and now in the 2020s. He has been a star for so long, and one of the brightest stars at that. But his performance in here, and I know it's probably quite simple to say, but this is by far and away his most hilarious role. Leonardo DiCaprio, if anybody says, there maybe would have been a critique before this, but he doesn't have the comedic chops, oh my god, what an absolute lie that is. He did have some comedic moments in something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Tarantino film, as Rick Dalton. He was funny in that, but my goodness me, Leonardo DiCaprio is this kind of bumbling father who's caught up in this absolute madness that this film is. He is absolutely wonderful. So the performances in here, and also Benicio del Toro in kind of a smaller role, but really does shine for every moment he's on screen as this kind of sensei character. But what One Battle After Another does really well, and a lot of movies do this, and you think of something like it's easy, you could just talk about something quite simple, and you could talk about movies that have such a wide scale of where we start and where we end, and it's a real adventure in that way. This movie really does have that, but this movie does have something that not always movies of this kind of thriller drama nature have, and it's that level of tension. The amount of tension throughout this film, basically from the start, because everything is under scrutiny, everything is a chase, everything is a, oh no pun intended with chaseability, but everything is, they are trying to escape in different, ways of explaining that. One Battle After Another has so much quality throughout all of it, and for me, when it comes to a movie that enthralled me the much, and I know that word is kind of whatever, but I do think of when it comes to sitting in the cinema and being the most locked into a film and the most enjoyable film of the year, I think for me, of course, this whole list has been the movies that were so much of that kind of engagement, audience engagement, but I think when it came to what really what put One Battle After Another at the top of my list for 2025, the reason was simply how much I enjoyed it. And I know that sounds so whatever, but it is, when it comes to a movie that really you find so much enjoyment out of, that's why I wouldn't go to anybody, you should enjoy Sinners more, or you should enjoy One Battle After Another more, or you should enjoy Nosferatu, or Wake Up Dead Man, or Weapons, or any of these films we've talked about today, or even some of the honourable mentions that pushed it close. This has been a real stacked year, and it just, honestly, it just comes down to personal preference, because I don't think anybody can deny the quality of these films. They're all absolutely amazing, and the level of movies we're getting at the moment is just really damn good. But when it comes to 2025, what movie just ticked the most boxes for me? It simply was One Battle After Another. But pushing it really close was all the movies we've already talked about. But at the top of this year, for the best movie of 2025, it was One Battle After Another. And that has been the year 2025. And just to summarise it, it has been a year of what I would say consistency of quality. When I think of the honourable mentions there in particular, it's probably one of the years with the most honourable mentions I've had for a year. Now, admittedly, it is probably a year I've seen more films than I usually do. Doing this, I get more of an opportunity now to push and see at least a film or two a week. So you get to see more of the good, and yes, more of the stinky, of course, as well. But what I've noticed over this last year was, yes, okay, there wasn't any 10 out of 10s. This is a rare year where there's so much quality, but none of them were 10 out of 10. But I can tell you this, particularly those top 4 that were sitting at 9.5s, they were so damn close to getting that 10 out of 10. And if I, on a rewatch, some of them may push into that bracket. But for the initial thoughts and seeing them, I just thought 2025 was a year, as I say, of consistency of quality. So many brilliant, anything between an 8 and a 9.5. We had so many of them. And, especially on the horror side, I know I've kind of harped on it there through the honourable mentions and the different entries there about horror. But when it comes to, in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, if you look back on 2025 and you go, well, what was the real shining light? Or what was the most memorable part of 2025 in regards to the films that came out that year? I think, bar a few exceptions, like a One Battle After Another, like a Wake Up Dead Man, like a Train Dreams, horror has been the star of the show for 2025. And of course, when it gets to the Academy Awards season, they'll probably not give any awards to horror movies because they never do. But they do seem to be lessening their stance on that a little bit. We've seen that a little bit with The Substance in the previous year. So I hope that maybe is the start of the turn of the tide in regards to horror movies and horror thrillers and horror anything getting a lot more acclaim and a lot more love when it comes to award seasons. But I do think when it comes to 2025, it has been a year where I've been surprised at how much quality there's been almost every month. Because for every real bad movie, there was at least 2 good to great movies we had from January all the way through to December. And I do think that that's where we're kind of at. And then I look ahead into 2026 and you've probably seen it yourself, the amount of movies that are on the way here in 2026, and I really can't wait to get seeing most of them. Yes, of course, there'll be some letdowns. There always is. There's a few movies that from my anticipated list of 2025 I had hoped would have been on this list, and if you'd have said to me, do you think there's a high probability they'll be on your top 10 list or top 5 or honourable mentions, there was a few that didn't really hit anywhere near the mark that it should have for 2025. But for the ones that really did, and honestly for those ones, if you'd have said to me at the start of 2025, I go back and look at my anticipated movies of 2025, I can't think of too many that actually were in the top 5 and certainly in the honourable mentions. So I think that's always that's one of the best things about movies and movie years. There's so much we can hope for and expect, but actually it's the ones that come out of the woodwork and you don't hear much about. You just hear a bit of acclaim going, oh well, that's a good film, you should go and see that. They're the ones that almost shock you the most, but also you get the most enjoyment out of. So for me, I could look at the long list of all the movies that I expect to be really good in 2026, and yes, there's a lot of them, but it's the ones that I won't see, or I won't see on a big list, or won't be highlighted to me until closer to the time, or I see the trailer, or whatever the case may be. And then I go, oh well, that might be it, and then who knows, that could end up in my 5 of the best of 2026. So I can't wait to see what comes next. Little bit of admin in regards to my channels over the last wee while. First of all, I want to say the appreciation and the love over this last year of 2025 has been honestly unbelievable. It has been truly unbelievable. To hit over 30,000 followers on Letterboxd, to be hit almost 2,000 followers here on TikTok, and here on YouTube be over 4,000 subscribers. I mean, the love has been astounding. Yes, I did change the initial thoughts, and I just thought in the nature of initial thoughts suits more for a reaction, and of course YouTube doesn't really, it does and it doesn't really click for reaction content, but for something like a TikTok it works a lot better, and I find more engagement on there. So I really would, if you're looking to hear more from me and you want to hear me more consistently, TikTok is the way. Or just follow me on Letterboxd, because that way I log everything, and the links for wherever I upload is in the description of the review. So I think that's probably the best way forward. If you've stuck around for this long video, I really do appreciate you, because I say it every time we do one of these videos, and these years, it's crazy how quickly a year comes around and we're back talking about movies again and rounding up a year that happened. We're at the start of here of 2026, and we'll blink and it'll be, the start of 2027. These years flying nowadays, and especially with the amount of movies that come out. When you think of the movies that are coming in 2026, and some of the bigger releases aren't coming to maybe in the summer, or maybe even right at the end of the year. And for those, you go, oh, it's ages away. Oh, I really wish that was sooner. But, because there's so much consistency of quality nowadays, and yes, as I keep having to preface, there is a lot of movies undoubtedly that I'll see in 2026, like I seen in 2025, that I go, that was the biggest pile of dross I've ever seen. That was absolute rubbish. Why did I waste my time even bothering to see that? But for every stinker, actually, for every stinker, there's at least 2 or 3 movies that are between good and great, and I think that that's something that really can't be overstated nowadays. The quality of movies that are being made, especially in regards to movies that maybe aren't the biggest budget movies, but movies that are more passion projects, really do work. And as far as me as an audience member going to see them, and a lot of the ones that I mentioned here on this list and the Honourable Mentions, you know, some of them are big studio movies, of course they are, but some of them are movies that are just movies that have been made with love from the writers, from the directors, from the people involved, from the cast, everything. It becomes a passion project, and those ones translate really well too. So I do think that, you know, I as I say every time, I can't wait to see what comes next for 2026, 2027, and whatever else. What's the one thing is absolutely for sure though, if you're here in the YouTube, and I really do appreciate you for sticking with me for all these years. You know, it was January 2021 was my first upload on this channel. It was one of those movie kind of compilation things, and my first initial thoughts was about the middle of that year. And to now be, you know, coming up to 5 years of doing this, and to see where it's gone to, I just can't thank you enough. It's really humbling, and it really is to see. And you know, listen, I'm not one of these channels with millions and millions of subscribers. Of course I'm not, but I'm someone that I love movies. I love talking about them. This isn't a career for me. This is a passion. This is a hobby, and I love doing it. I love seeing the movies. If I wasn't making videos, I would still be going to see all these movies. So it's really it's enhanced my love for film. So I just want to thank you for enhancing my love for the art form as a whole. It just has been amazing. If you want to stick around and see me talking more about the movies on, as I say, TikTok is probably the most active, so if you want to follow me over there, that would be really appreciated. Letterboxd, that's where I log everything. If you want to follow me on there, or you just want to follow me here on YouTube, the 5 of the best videos and the shorts, there's a few of those already there. The worst movies of the year already there. The short version of this video is already there. So if you want to go and check those videos out, I'd really, really appreciate it for it. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, sitting and listening to me talk for quite a while there about my movies of 2025 as this kind of long roundup of the year, as it always is. Next year I'll be here with the 5 of the best long version. The short version will also be there. The worst movies of the year. All of it will come this time next year. But between now and then, we've got a hell of a lot of movies to talk about, and I can't wait to get started with 2026. So if you want to stick around, subscribe, leave a like, let me know you enjoyed this. I appreciate you so much. And if you do stick around, I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love everyone.